All right, we will give a few more, just another minute to let more people come in, and then we'll be happy to get started with our conversation this evening. Thank you all so very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Is it, Michael, really quick, the looking at the date on the slide, is that deliberate?
Oops, nope, that was an accident. And fixing that will take more effort. So how about I just acknowledge for the recording that I got my date wrong. So thanks very much for that, James. All right, we're right at 5:30. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. My name is Michael Cato. It's my pleasure to serve as the facilitator for tonight's conversation. I am the CIO and Senior Vice President here at Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the Fellowship Director for the Next Leaders Fellowship, which will be the topic we'll be taking on this evening. I'm also excited to be joined tonight by a few colleagues from the program itself. And we will start with introductions. We thought this evening we would talk a little bit about the fellowship itself. We have a few slides here that we'll share just to walk through a bit of the structure of the fellowship, what we're aspirations, the things we've done so far. And then we'll be seeking feedback and questions from you as the attendees in this webinar. So please feel free to use the Q&A at any time. We'll be paying attention to that as we go through our conversation this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn to my colleagues, and we'll start with our fellows who are on tonight's call. I thought this slide might be helpful so that as they share their name and institution, those who are watching the recording later on or joining us tonight will be able to make some associations. So Faye, if I can start with you, would you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly. My name is Faye Snowden. I am the manager of the Technology Program Office at University of California, Berkeley. Welcome.
Glad to have you tonight, Faye. Thank you. Felix.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Felix Zuniga with the California State University at the Office of the Chancellor. I serve as a campus engagement partner.
Thank you very much, Felix. James.
Hello, my name is James Johnson. I'm the Director of Educational Technology and IT Support for Events and Conferences at St. Mary's College of California, as well as also the current Interim Senior Diversity Officer. Welcome.
Thank you very much, James. Kenitra.
Kenitra Horsley, I'm the Chief Information Officer at Queen's University of Charlotte. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kenitra. Rowena.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rowena Carlos. I'm the Assistant CIO for CRM and Student Information Systems at New Jersey Institute of Technology. And welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much, Rowena. And lastly, among our fellows, Stephanie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Cox. I'm at Indiana University currently, and I'm the manager of Client Virtualization Services, which operates out of the Office of Vice President in Information Technology at Indiana University. It's a long title, but yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much for that. And we will get into the presently part in the conversation, I'm sure. So with that, let's go ahead and turn to our fellows our mentors who are here with us this evening. Mac, would you mind giving us a start to introduce yourself?
Yeah, glad to. First off, welcome everyone and happy holidays. I'm Keith McIntosh. I go by Mac. I currently serve as the Vice President and Chief Information Officer at the University of Richmond.
And Sherry.
Welcome. My name is Sherry Braxton. I'm the Senior Director for Digital Innovation at Bowdoin College.
And Wes, I see you just joined. So if I'm going to back up one, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself this evening or afternoon.
Sure thing. What's up, everybody? I'm Wes Johnson, Executive Director for Campus IT Experience with Berkeley IT at UC Berkeley.
Thank you very much, Wes. Glad you're here for this conversation. And I'm reminded I'm never going to go behind you. Your voice on something like this just makes me feel very intimidated. Wes clearly has a music background and it shows in conversations. All right, so I thought we could get started by describing a little bit about the fellowship. And again, we'll be taking questions all the way through. So for those who are attending this this afternoon for the session, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A. We'll be watching that all the way through. Sherry and Mac, if you can help me keep an eye on that as we go, if I miss anything. So the first is our intention for the program itself, right? And you can see that on our website that we're pursuing a vision where all information and technology professionals have the opportunities, support, and advocacy to achieve senior leadership roles. That's the summary of what we're trying to achieve. And our way of coming at this is to try to identify talented IT professionals from historically excluded backgrounds that have would benefit from being in this immersive experience. And so the structure of the program is actually fairly straightforward, that what we've done is identified 12 participants, put them together in a cohort, and then have a combination of sponsored experiences, which we'll talk about a bit more in detail, as well as my description has often been close mentorship and coaching throughout the program year. And I'm looking forward for you to get a chance to hear from the fellows themselves about what that has looked like for them, because we've made an attempt to make sure that this is representative and speaking to what they need, as opposed to what's coming from the mentors, just from the mentors. And what we're hoping to do also, and I think we've been successful in our first year, but this is what the conversation tonight is attempting to get us a chance to dig into, is to build a community among and around this group of fellows, right? So they're connecting them to each other, and then bringing the resources to bear, to support their continued growth and moving forward in their own careers. Sherry, Mac, you were both part of the initial design of this. Is there anything you would add from the overall summary of what we're trying to go after?
No, I think if anything, Michael, you've covered it really well, but I do think there's been this unspoken that there is a pipeline issue. And I think for me, I know that's not true. And so while, I appreciate everybody's journey is unique, I feel like we have an opportunity with this to kind of help those who may not have, they're talented enough, but may not be seen or heard from, and giving them access and exposure. So I don't think that's something we directly try to do, Michael, but I do think that's a tangential output. I would imagine that many of the fellows would say that as well.
So Sherry, let me turn to you next. Anything you would add to this description, and then I'll turn to our fellows as well.
The only thing I would say is I think, and again, we might not have had it in these bullets, but one of the amazing outcomes was teaching the fellows the importance of their network and building their network, and how it naturally occurs once you start going out and having the experiences that they had during this one-year program. So I think that's been a really good outcome for them.
I appreciate that, Sherry. Mac, you said something at the your initial description, that this is often described as a pipeline issue, that the problem is there are not enough IT professionals from more diverse backgrounds, and we've got to get more people in the pipeline before we'll end up having more senior professionals. And it was one of the aspects of our conversation I found really helpful, that in so many of the conversations I've been in previously, the focus therefore was on undergraduate education or earlier, right? That we've got to fix it there. And my response was often, I'm not opposed to that, but it feels like we're missing something by not doing more to identify the people who are already here, right? That just talking about it as a pipeline issue implies we've got to get people in the beginning of the pipeline, as opposed to identifying those who may already be there. And I see a few of our fellows nodding. So I'm just curious how you all have thought about that in the span of your careers and experiences.
I will go, if it's okay. Okay, great, thank you. I think that the notion of it as a pipeline issue is very interesting. The last few years, my thoughts have been, like you said, you're not opposed to making sure people are ready for these positions, but my feeling is that there are a lot of people out there from historically marginalized groups that are ready, but the structures that are built into these institutions, there is a piece with, there's this systematic racism that is in play, and we have to also do things to change that in order to get diversities to the level that we want in these institutions. So I think that's one thing. Another thing is because I think in one of the sessions, I talked about one of the things I so appreciate from the Next Leaders Fellowship is that they did help me understand how critical it is to have networks, and that it also helped me realize that I was not in the room where things were happening. And it helped me understand that there are even rooms, right? And helped me understand how to get into those rooms behind those closed doors where decisions are being made about placing people in these leadership positions. So I think that, those are my comments to those last two questions about the pipeline and some of the issues that we're having with diversity, especially in higher ed at leadership levels.
Thank you very much for that, Faye. That's really powerful. Romina, I'll come right to you. I see your hand. I realized one thing I didn't emphasize on this slide was that close mentorship part, right? That mentored by an accomplished and diverse group of senior leaders, right? We've been using the language of mentors to distinguish those of us who are part of the planning group. And while every fellow has a primary mentor, we've been trying to be very explicit throughout the experience, and hopefully this is what you all have had, the experience that you've had so far, is that you can reach out to any of the Next Leaders Fellow mentors at any point, right? That we're all really trying to think about how we can contribute to your success. I say that because one of the things that I realized has been important to my career progression was that I benefited from having a couple of really close mentors early in my career, one of whom happened to be a Black woman. And I knew at the time how unique that was, but it was the fact that it happened when it did for me was so pivotal, because I never ever questioned whether I could aspire to that role because I had interacted with her so early on. And even though it was years after that before I regularly encountered a lot of Black women who were CIOs, I had that experience and I never really questioned whether this is something I could aspire to. And it was as we started having these conversations, we started to appreciate how that's not always common. And it doesn't always have to be a mentor who looks like you, right? So both things are true. But that for way too many people, and Faye, I appreciate you explicitly acknowledging the systemic racism in this, and some of it is unconscious bias, right? For whatever combination of reasons, I'm going to find it easier to mentor someone who I can relate to, or they might find it easier to ask me for mentoring because they can relate to me. Either way, you can end up leaving some people out of those conversations unless you're more intentional. Rowena?
So for me, when I started the program and where I am today, I think the program allowed me to think beyond, what I was doing, and also gave me the confidence. All the sessions that you had, all the education, all the Deloitte sessions, and so many other sessions, meeting different mentors. It allowed me to think that there are people out there who want me to be successful. It's just gave me the confidence, and I'm sure others can benefit from that, because previously we were all stuck in our own world. Okay, we didn't think we could go higher, but you allowed us to dream. That's what I think, and the mentoring was a really strong factor. The coaching, mentoring that you've given us throughout this year has been great.
Appreciate that, Rowena. James, I see your hand, and then we'll dig into a bit more of the details, and then we'll turn off the presentation and talk.
Yeah, I think for me, I recognize the pipeline coming in, and because I was actively trying to find my way to higher position. And when you start looking at, when you start talking about things around structural racism, and I don't think all of it was intentional. I think some of it was, like attracts like. But what the program allowed me to do is take that onus off of me and my capabilities and say, okay, name this. This is what's going on. And this is my group who I can talk about these things with and decipher whether or not I'm ready or whether or not it's a structural issue. And so it allowed me to focus. It allowed me to work on the things that I need to work on for the next step. And so without getting too deep into it, but it was able to have the language, have the community to walk that through, and also to relieve a burden that this isn't necessarily me, it's how other people perceive me. And so being a part of the program also signaled a level of seriousness around my career. And so when you start looking at, you know, a diverse group of senior leaders that are, you know, that are decorated, it's like, oh wait, you're, you know this person? I'm like, yeah, that's my mentor. You know, wait, you know this person? Like, yeah, I have his cell phone. What do you need? You know, so it's one of those things where it's a slight flex, but it's also kind of it's a slight flex, but it's also kind of like, you know, I'm serious. Like, here I am in front of you. Please see me as somebody who's serious about their career, not just somebody who you don't have time for at the moment because you have all these other fires to put out. So that being said, the program has done a lot as far as signaling a level of seriousness, as well as getting rid of a burden that I was self-inflicting on myself because I wasn't sure how to communicate around this topic. So thank you.
Really appreciate that, James. And a couple of those pieces I'm hoping we'll get back to in the Q&A as well. So let's talk a little bit about the program itself then. And there's two big pieces, or three, I think we might emphasize before we go into open Q&A. The first is the sponsored experiences. And that right now, for this year, we've done 3 of them, and it's our intention next year to repeat the cycle. That the program launches aligned with the NERComp, the Northeast Regional Computing Association Conference in Providence, Rhode Island in March 2023. Let's be clear, when we say these are sponsored, that means that the fellowship will be covering all of the travel and registration costs, flight and hotel, including flight hotel, to engage in any of these experiences. And at the NERComp conference, what we did was we actually had 3 days with the conference itself, and then the final 2 days of the week were focused on the retreat for the Next Leaders Fellowship. We did a combination of a series of what's a program called the Designing Your Life workshop, as well as we launched compassion-based resilience training, which is an experience that the fellows have continued to be able to engage with on a monthly conversations with the facilitators from the Nalanda Institute in New York City. And the principle there was using those tools to help us as people of color and people from historically excluded backgrounds navigate spaces that at best were not designed with us in mind, right? And that energy and that effort, James, you described that as I'm not owning the responsibility for fixing it all, but knowing that there's some things that are helpful for me to do to be successful, right? And the duality of that experience I have found just really challenging. And we thought it would be really helpful to do both, right? To have a set of conversations about career progression and life and how you think about being intentionally, that's where the language of designing your life comes from, but also having this parallel thread that was going throughout the year about how do we take care of ourselves in the process, right? And so I'm curious, as we get to the Q&A, I want to ask a few of you as fellows whether any of that surprised you, because when we first came up with the structure, I know a few people asked us, is this really, you know, this is a IT leaders session. Is this the kind of topics you really think you should be taking on? And the feedback we've gotten from you all so far seems to be that those worked really well, but I was curious if any of that surprised you. The second experience that we did was traveling to Seattle to spend time with AWS at their invitation at the AWS Imagine conference, which is a one-day conference focused on higher ed. But we added an additional day that we were able to have some experiences in Seattle with the fellows themselves, and really leaning into what could we learn from Amazon and their culture of innovation, and having some great meals along the way. Oh yeah, I skipped over the food part at Providence, but we eat well. Would you all agree we ate well? All right. And then the third experience for the year that was sponsored was coming together for EDUCAUSE in October. And so next year, that will be in Chicago. This year it was in Denver. We spent the entire week together. We had a one-day retreat for the fellowship, but also we spent time in one day with Deloitte, and they took us through a business chemistry workshop that I have to admit, it went really well. I was so, you know, as a mentor, I was grateful I got to participate, right? And it really made my experience for the week in some really profound ways. So that's the description of the structure. I'll turn to Mac and Sherry first. Anything you would add from any of those three, and then the fellows, any comments from your experience at them? But Mac, Sherry first.
Yeah, I would just say this is not a passive experience. You start off that first day in NERComp and we have you thinking and uncomfortable and talking and working together and you know, all of that imposter syndrome of thinking you can have to sit in the back of the room is almost gone immediately. And I'll let the fellows speak to those first few hours of the program, but that really framed them becoming such a close-knit group. And so I'm really pleased with the structure and how that, as well as the CBRT piece, which really teaches you how to take care of yourself as you're dealing with the things at home and at work, and all of the complexities of those situations. So I'm going to stop talking, and it's best to hear from the people who actually lived it. Oh, and by the way, and I second what Michael said, the mentors, it's great for us because you're always learning, and it's just a learning experience for everyone who's part of it, learning and growing.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Mac, would you add anything to that?
Just real quick, Sherry did a good job, and as you did too, Michael. When I see this, I think about engagement, how much the fellows are going to be engaged, and the growth opportunity that happens for them personally, but then the engagement of connecting with the fellows, as Sherry mentioned. I think about one of the things I really like about the program is, although we're thinking about careers and professional growth and development, this is whole person. This gets at, aspects of you just being a human being and trying to just interact as a person of color in the world, let alone coming into the office in the professional setting as well. So I think that's one of the things I really think about it. As Michael said, we didn't have this. Michael and I didn't have this coming up through the ranks, and I'm sitting in the room going, well, I'm glad I'm in the room as a mentor, so I get a little something out of this, right? This is nice.
Really appreciate that. And I will turn to the fellows. Any comments on any of these experiences as we describe a bit more about the program?
I don't mind going, but I don't know if Rowena had her hand raised.
No, that was from before, Felix. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So Michael, you asked one of the, like, what stood out to us as part of the experience. And, I think going in to NERComp that first week, I think all of us were kind of unsure what to expect or what was gonna be happening. And one of the things you said, or I forget, I think it was you, Michael, on one of the first days, was that there was no expectation for us to go through this program and like come out being a CIO. It was really our path, what we're going to do, and no matter what choices we make, this group was going to be there to be supportive of us, and that really stood out to me, and I think allowed for me to grow in that way, because I knew that I didn't have to be performing or working towards some kind of expectation coming out of this program, and that was really valuable. And likewise, I've done tons of leadership development and programs and things like that, and never ever have I felt as welcome as I did with this group, with these mentors, with these fellows, as we got together and bonded real quickly. And I think the amount of caring that comes from you all as the creators of this program really shines through in everything that you do. And that alone makes anything that we do together valuable, let alone everything else that we've done in the programs so far. So those are the first initial thoughts that jumped out at me.
Really appreciate that, Felix. Thank you. Stephanie.
Yeah, I have to just follow up on what Felix was saying. While each one of those tiers was very educational for us, especially going to the AWS Imagine, really nothing really compares to the level of personal growth that you receive from each other. I think that's been huge for me. Never have I ever been at any technical event or meeting where literally I'm not the only person that looks like me in the room. And I've been doing this for 27 years. So it was almost overwhelming in a good way for all of us to come together. And what that did for me was just really allowed me to grow as a person and getting rid of the imposter syndrome. I have it still there, but I'm working on it. It's like 20 years plus in the DNA or something. But nothing compares to this feeling of connectedness that I knew was missing in my professional career, but I did not know the depth of what that was causing. So I'm just more, I would advocate, evangelize for the program all day, because it just means that much to me, to my heart. So that's it.
Really appreciate that, Stephanie. And Kenitra.
So what came up for me was just at NERCOM was the creation of a safe space for us, which was so unique that I had never experienced. I don't know if anyone else had, but it allowed us to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and really start that growth. So it was almost like you guys broke us down like in a week or a matter of minutes in a room, and then it gave us an opportunity to show where we could elevate our careers, where we could connect with others that were like-minded and in similar ways. And I would say what also was surprising to me and unique is that the fellows were not, young in their careers. I think many of us have been doing this for a number of years, and then there was still such a growth opportunity, right? There was such learning that took place, and an awareness and just building up from a place where you may not have thought you could go, right? We have been at this for a number of years and having a safe space to grow and develop. And I just think that was just so unique about the program and the network that we've built, and that exposure that we may not have gotten on our own, right? So.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Kenitra. And Wes, I'll take yours and then we'll go on to the next couple so we can then turn off the slides. Go for it, Wes.
Yeah, appreciate it. Kind of specific to the sponsored events, a thing that was beneficial to me is up to that point in my career, I only been to a handful of conferences. And generally the scenario for me going was kind of like some other higher ranking person couldn't go at last minute. Hey, let's bring on Wes. So you spend the whole conference, no one means any bad intentions, but they're just kind of like, oh, Wes, you're here. What are you doing here? Like kind of like that versus being part of this program. People were looking for NLF people at the, no one was asking me why I was here. They were begging me to come back. I got sponsored and got to be part of my first panel for EDUCAUSE. I don't know if that would have happened the same way if I did not go through this program, because until I went through this program, I didn't really see the importance of doing this type of work. My career was already going the way it was going, and I can't explain how that worked out. So the last thing I was thinking about was anything beyond just, Wes, you're doing a good job, just wait till the next tap on the shoulder. So going through this and it being part of the program and kind of being sponsored and directly supported, like y'all kind of put, not even kind of, you put your reputation and name a bit on the line to say, we want to represent these folks in these spaces. And the impact for me was that maybe for the first time, I felt like I had a reason to be there. I understood the game I was playing, and I felt like I belonged in the room compared to how I'd been before.
Really appreciate that, Wes. And I know there's a lot we're leaving out because we're summarizing this, but I thank you so much for emphasizing those pieces. So let's move on a little bit to what we have, and then hopefully we get to the Q&A. So just as a reminder for the attendees tonight, if you have any questions, we are paying attention to the Q&A. We would definitely welcome them. We have a set of questions we're going to turn to, but we would welcome having questions from the participants as well.
And Michael, I think real quick, please, if they have questions, please put them in the Q&A now. We're monitoring and we're waiting for your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mac. So additionally, there's one sponsored leadership development experience. So one thing that's been really important for us on the fellowship side as we've designed the program is we don't want this to be seen as competing with the existing professional development that's already out there. And so the way we've tried to tie that together is for each of the fellows are then sponsored to select, and this is completely up to them, to choose which professional existing leadership development program they'd like to do. And the fellowship will support their application, will fund any application fee. And then for next year, what we're going to be doing is contributing $1,000 towards the travel and hotel expenses to make sure that you can fully engage in that experience. And one of the things that's important to be specific about too, as we're describing this for next year, is that program does not have to happen within your fellowship year. We were unclear about that when we first started the fellowship. We always said we were open to it. And the feedback we've gotten from this year's fellows is that was really important because doing an existing program in the midst of the fellowship would have been really difficult to pull off. So there isn't an expectation that you have to do this experience during your fellowship year. This time around, in this particular cohort, all of our fellows will be doing their experience after the fellowship year, the cohort year is over. You are still a fellow afterwards, but your cohort year ends, and you can still, your leadership development program will happen after that. And then additionally, we've had these ongoing virtual experiences. The slide says monthly, but we've actually, the CBRT pieces were happening monthly, and we had a separate thread that was the program conversations. And then the fellows themselves were engaging with each other much more often. So don't let that monthly description fool you. There was a lot of activity between the members of the program as they were going through. One piece I realized we haven't touched on is that there was ongoing engagement with our search firm partners. And that became one piece that I thought has been really, really valuable to the conversations we've been able to have about progression and going through the search process. So hoping we can touch on that a little bit when we get to the Q&A as well. And then the last thing I wanted to just emphasize is if you are interested in applying, the information is actually live on the website now. Through the nextleadersfellowship.org website, just click on apply. It will take you to the online application system. But on the website, we actually list out the eligibility information, the expectations of being a fellow, as well as we are listing out the specific criteria we use to select the candidates from the applications. We want it to be as transparent as we possibly can be about what are we using to evaluate candidates, what are we looking for, right? So all of those details, rubrics, those are the exact rubrics, that we are using in the evaluation system to help us choose for the next class. So again, when we get to open Q&A, or if you have questions on that now, please feel free to put that in, and we'll be happy to describe that in a bit more detail. And then the last thing I wanted to do before turning off the slides and turning to our questions is just offer gratitude to our sponsors. And this slide is reflective of our sponsors for the current cohort. We actually have a longer list of sponsors for the next cohort. I can't list them all as yet because we're still getting all of our contracts in place, but I'm eternally grateful to the sponsors who believed that, and especially this first round, these are folks who believed in an idea and invested in an idea that we didn't have anything other than our, our good names, right? Our reputations and our belief in what we were attempting to do. The next round of sponsors equally are willing to invest in something, but now they can see the evidence of what we've done. And therefore, there will be a larger group of sponsors who will be engaging in the process to help us go through. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn off the slide share, and I see we've got a question in the Q&A already about the application process. Yep. Sherry, would you mind taking that one while I get this set up?
Yes, so the question is there a fee associated with the application process? And there is not a fee associated with the application process, but we do ask the institution, sponsoring institution, to put $1,000, I think was the amount, right, Michael, toward participation in the fellowship.
And so that's if you are accepted, there's
Yes.
a participation fee, but that participation fee can also be waived. So if you're reduced or waived, so if you're in a situation where your home institution doesn't have the budget to support or some other reason, just let us know. If you're accepted and that $1,000 will be a problem, that is one of the things we are structured to do, is to have that fee reduced or completely waived. And we've done that in a number of cases. All right, with that then, let me get to my Q&A. Oh, and of course, the minute I get there, it goes away from me. All right, so let's start with the first one. How did you first become interested in the program, in the fellowship itself? And I'll go with hands. Let's start with the fellows. Any of the fellows interested in, how did it first come to your attention, and why were you first interested?
James.
I have to credit Felix for tapping me. Part of my journey, as far as like career-wise, I was getting more and more involved with the community groups in EDUCAUSE. And so that's how Felix and I met, and we created a bond there. And he knew some of my interests as far as DEI as well as technology. And so he's like, hey, just off the strength of the stuff that we've talked about, take a look at this. And I looked at it and I almost melted in my chair. I'm like, this was everything. It was like, it had all of the great bits that we've been talking about in the diversity CG group of EDUCAUSE, as well as some of just the other work that we do. And so it was just a great marriage of the stuff that we aspired or really wanted, as well as just kind of like, it just blended the tech. And so just looking at, you know, the application and what was required, I instantly just sat down and had drafts and drafts and drafts and made sure I sat down and answered those questions thoroughly. And I was just excited. And the going through the program definitely did not disappoint. And so I owe everything to Felix. But once I finally read it, it had everything I wanted. So I'll leave it at that.
James, that's really awesome. You know, I did not know that. I did not know we owed Felix for your participation. So,
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Felix. Anyone else? Would you mind sharing? How did you first become aware of it, and what initially attracted you?
I'll just jump in real quick, Stephanie. You know, Michael, I've always been one to look for like the next opportunity, the next training, the next thing that's out there. And I'll share with some people that I had applied to a fellowship already, right? And the application was due like at the end of October. And then I saw the announcement for NLF and I was like, oh crap, like this is like exactly what I'm looking for. And I've already applied to this. And I figured, well, let me apply anyway, because hey, they're only choosing 12 people. I don't even know if I want to be picked, and maybe I'll get one or the other, and I end up getting accepted to both, right? So I had the challenge of going to my bosses and saying, hey, I've got the great opportunity to do both of these things. Will you support me? And of course I had their full support. So it was awesome. Just timing, and like James says, really thinking through those application questions, because it's not something you can sit down and write in you know, one quick application. You have to think about what you want to write there. And so for anybody on the call, please take a look at those and start your drafts and thinking through those questions, because they're really meaningful as well.
Really appreciate that, Felix. One thing I want to, and Stephanie will come right to you. One of the things I want to emphasize that you just said, Felix, from the perspective of the mentors, one thing we really appreciated was the applicants who answered the questions. We were astonished at how many people didn't answer the question or gave us answers that were completely unrelated to what the question actually asked, right? So it's not a long list of questions, but so we really are looking for answers to the questions. And it felt like a little bit like going through the resume process, right? That you ask, or interview process where you ask someone a question and they answer something else. Please don't do that. You know, so to Felix's point, get a chance to, you know, have someone review your answers before you submit it. And that's why we've actually put the application itself is on the website. So you don't have to go through the system to be able to see the application and see the questions themselves. So please feel free to take advantage of that. Stephanie, I'll turn to you next.
Okay, like Felix, I have to say, I had two things that had to help me along. I always need a lot of help. So I learned about it at EDUCAUSE. I was at EDUCAUSE and I'm like, oh, that's a nice fellowship. But like everything that I do, I had a whole lot going on. And while I was at EDUCAUSE, I was probably still working. When I came back, I kind of forgot about it. But then I remembered what Max said. And he and I had worked on, we had worked on some DEI work separate from this group with ARIA. And he had told me then about it. He reminded me again. And I went back and I looked and I was like, what was that? I had notes. I actually had notes from a conversation with you, Max. So you are the other reason that I also applied for the NLF. So yeah, 2 reminders for Stephanie. Thank you.
Well, I thought there was one other hand up after.
It was mine.
Faye.
Yeah, I don't have a good backstory. I heard about it from my CIO, who I admire so much, Jen Stringer, at a panel at EDUCAUSE. So that's how I learned it. But one of the reasons I put my hand up is I wanted to kind of riff off of what Michael was saying about answering the questions. I think that is so important, because I've seen that too on applications where people choose not to answer the questions or follow the directions. But another thing that I really tried to do on my application was to be thoughtful about my answers. And I was really careful to use plain language instead of corporate speak, because I think a lot of times we hide behind plain language. I mean, it still I'm corporate speak. It still has to be well written, right? But I just think it's really important in applications like this, because this program will challenge you. It's not just, oh, I get to be a part of a great group, which it is, I get great food, which it is, but you are going to get challenged and in some ways shook to your core. So it's really important that you be authentic, speak plainly, well-written as you're answering those questions. And I don't know if that's what got me selected, but that's what I tried to do on my application. And then like others here, I went through draft after draft to make sure I was satisfied with it.
So one piece I'll add to that, Faye, the fact that you're a published author, I'm sure helped your narrative. We didn't know that at the time.
No, we didn't.
But yes, you answered the question. The idea of answering plainly, I would definitely emphasize that. So we got a couple questions in the queue. Rowena, if you don't mind, let's take a couple of those questions. Don't forget your point that you wanted to weigh in, so we can come back to you as well. The first one is, someone who's excited about the program. Thank you very much for that. Can you talk about the impact the program has had on your leading DEI efforts at your organizations? So I'll throw that out to us as a group. Mac, you want to start, or you look like
no,
you were just jumping in?
I know the individual that wrote that question, and I'm assuming, I'm not sure, this is for the fellows more than the mentors. I would think.
Please, let's start with the fellows. Has the experience impacted the way you're working in your DEI efforts at your organization?
Go ahead, Wes.
Oh, okay. So not obviously, I would say. All right, I can't point to a direct thing that I've just immediately started doing after the program. I'll say that I got charged up by the program. There's things that I'm doing way more visibly and intentionally due to the program. And I guess maybe I lied a little bit. There is one thing that I took from this program that's been super helpful, and it's the yes and exercise we did. Being able to sit down with a group of folks who are kind of, when we talk about DEI stuff, at least within my orgs, there's a lot of historic context that comes with that. And I've only been with the org for a year. So there's a lot of things that happened before me, and it kind of gets presented to me as if I dealt with this 5 years ago. Wes, we want you to fix it. And it's really helped working through, and I made use of the yes and to kind of think about like, okay, well, what happened to you 5 years ago? If it happens now, do you think it would get mishandled in the same way now as it was 5 years ago? Because a lot of these were like personnel things that happened. And the yes and was a tool that I kind of stole from the box to kind of break that down, because the buts kept blocking the conversation. The and meant that I validated what they said, and we're talking about like, how are we doing now? So that is one thing that I took directly and brought into that work.
Appreciate that very much, Wes. James, you were weighing in?
Yeah, during the program, I actually stepped in as an interim senior diversity officer. And prior to this program, a lot of IT teams that I were on shied away from the touchy-feely stuff, anything social justice. And so coming out of 2020, the George Floyd and things like that, it allows more conversation. So with the NLF program, it allowed me to compare institutions, have a conversation around, my positionality as an African-American male and how I step into certain environments and require a certain conversation, a certain level of that conversation. And so just being hyper aware of that, but then having the sophistication of understanding of who's in the room. So yeah, I think the overall impact there is being able to have a sophisticated conversation and understanding who's in the room and who can make what move, and maybe other strategies. And so my last point here is going to EDUCAUSE and having that conversation on a national stage, and having people come up to me and asking me, how do I implement certain strategies at my institution to apply that to their institution, and then exchanging what they're struggling with, and just exchanging like, oh, okay, well, we're not the only institution dealing with this. I'm not the only IT professional dealing with this. And so this whole synergy around improving your strategy on top of gaining new strategies and just trying to figure that out. And so that's how I would answer that question.
Appreciate that, James. And Faye, I see your hand.
Just real quickly, I would have to kind of piggyback on what Wes was saying about not obviously. I mean, I wasn't obviously at the top of my mind, thinking how I'm going to change this to further DEI initiatives at my organization. But it did shift my perspective, and I started to think about things differently. And I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with a colleague about, we have a lot of BIPOC tech people that are in these entry-level positions, and we recognize that they've had talent. And then we were thinking, well, how do we help them recognize that talent and talk to them about things that they need to do in order to further that talent so they can apply for these positions? How do they need to be prepared? And I don't know if I would have had a conversation like that if I hadn't chosen NLF. It would have been like, oh yeah, isn't that a shame? But my first thought was action mode. Maybe we should set up a mentoring program. Maybe we should work with HR and talk about how they're doing career pathing. Maybe we should have a career day. I mean, all these ideas and things that I would not have really thought about if it wasn't for the program.
Yeah, appreciate that, Fig. I want to add one piece, if I can, Siobhan, to a question I see, and Sherry, thank you so much for answering the question about is an ability to relocate a factor for consideration, given that the program seems to be geared towards upward mobility. And I read two assumptions in there I want to just highlight, right? Because one is that relocation is required for progression, right? And that's something that we actually talked about quite a bit, that depending on how you look at it, that would be the case. But we also had, over the 9 months we've been in this year's cohort, we've been really trying to think through, what does progress look like for you as an individual? And what are the design parameters that are important to you? And if, I'm place bound, and even that term feels negative, right? I need to be in place because I'm caring for my family, or I've got these strong familiar connections that are also important to me, then progress probably means something else. Great, let's figure out what that is, celebrate that, and really lean into it. And I don't want it to make sure that everyone doesn't miss what we said earlier on. And I think Felix, you highlighted this, or Felix or James, I apologize for forgetting who said this, but we emphasized in the very first conversation that progress for each fellow is up to you, right? Our role as mentors in the fellowship is to support you figuring out what that looks like for you and understanding it might change over time, celebrating that and seeing how we can support you moving towards it. So it may not be upward mobility. Now, we do use the language of senior leadership roles because that's our aspiration, but how that manifests for you could look very different than the next person. And we are not just okay with that, we are excited about that and contributing to that. So I just wanted to emphasize those two pieces of the question as well. And I realize that'd be easier to talk through than try to write a response.
And Michael, while you're at it, I think that connects to the question from Christian as well about, and I don't know how fast we want to answer that one. Sherry answered it in the Q&A, but do you have to be in a leadership position? No, I don't think that's a requirement.
That's correct. You do not. That's right. That's right. You do not. What we're looking for is your aspiration, and there you'll see that in the questions that we're really trying to get through, get an understanding of, where are you, what are you looking for, and how do you envision the fellowship at this point being helpful to you?
Yeah, and one of the things I think, as you were talking, Michael, I think the fellowship does a good job of, I don't want to say tailor, but we meet the fellow where the fellow is and try to help that fellow from where they are to where they want to go.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Mac. And Felix, see your hand.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think James mentioned signaling earlier, and I think when you go through a program like this and participate, and like James talked about the network, it signals to your own organization that you are open to new opportunities, growth opportunities, and they start looking for things for you too, because they realize we're getting contacted now by recruiters, and if I don't start looking at doing something for you here, I might lose you sooner than later, kind of thing. And that's what happened to me, definitely. And a lot of new internal opportunities started opening up.
Really appreciate that, Felix. And that goes to that point of, it's, progress is up to you. What does that look like for you? So if your institution responds to your participation in ways that resonates with you, we celebrate that, and we're on board with, if there are ways we can contribute to you thinking through negotiation or figuring out how to fit that in. We're definitely willing to engage in those conversations as well. James?
Just to piggyback off of what Felix said, long story short, I was one of those people who looked at location as kind of like an anchor due to family and things like that as well. And so having mentors helped me put other things in perspective, and looking at other wins throughout my career, it actually helped me and my CIO currently. We're actually having conversations and what that looks like. And so being a part of the NLF and some of the people who are mentors in the NLF, and him hearing about these other individuals, it actually helped change the conversation from like, okay, that's good, you know, yeah, we can keep a monthly conversation to like, hey, let me check in. How are you growing? How else can I unleash, you know, this division for you so you can learn this skill? So it goes from very aspirational and like, okay, yeah, that's cute, to actually let's develop a skill. These are the steps that I took. Now he's opening up the playbook. And so that's where I would just piggyback off of what Felix said.
Really appreciate that, James. Stephanie, I see your hand.
Yep, really quick, I have to talk about the relocation thing really quickly. I was probably the main person in that category. I'm born, raised in Indiana, and I work for Indiana University. Always thought that I would always live and work in Indiana. And through the program and through much of the connections around everyone in this program, I'm taking a new position in Connecticut, which I can't even believe I'm doing this. I'm going to be the new, everybody's clapping, thank you all, the Assistant Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Trinity College in Connecticut. And I say that, I'm super humbled and just obviously ecstatic over it. But I was able to work with them to work out a situation where I'm going to be very much remote and hybrid in 2 states. I don't think that it started out being like that, but my point is you just never know what opportunities will be there when you open your mind to possibilities. And I am a living example of it. I still can't believe I'm doing it, but I had to share that.
Oh, Stephanie, we are thrilled for you. Thrilled. And it's funny because you and Kenitra, so I think Kenitra was the first fellow to change roles after the program started, though we kept joking that, well, we can't claim credit since you came in as interim and then got converted. And it was, you know, Kenitra gave us some feedback that we were actually helpful to some of the conversations you had, right? And so I'm trying to keep track of, I think we're up to 3 or 4 role changes, if not 4 or 5 at this point of the 12, 9 months in. So really, really grateful for and excited for all of you for what this is, how you are making the most of the opportunity.
Thank you. I want to say one other thing really quickly.
Please.
When it comes to the application process and how you present yourself. And I hope too, I'm saying this mostly for the folks, the participants that are on here, if there's someone that you know, which we all do, we all know some person of color or that kind of just keeps their heads down and just works. It's just, that was me, right? They're never going to think about reaching out and going through a program like this. You know, take the time, you all, to send them the link to look into this program. I can't say enough about the mentality that we all have, this group especially, to pay it forward. We know how difficult and how lonely our journey has been, and it does not have to stay that way. So if you have that, I think as in the forefront of what you do to pay it forward, to think about the other person who might not apply for this, but that you see the potential in them, I know that this program will just always continue to go far beyond whatever Michael's wildest dreams were, because we are currently living that. Thank you.
Really appreciate that, Stephanie. Thank you very much for adding that. Kenitra, I see your hand.
I was going to say, when, you know, what came up for me was that when I applied, you know, I came to it thinking, all right, let me do this. I know this is something that I need. I need some additional tools in my toolbox as I come into higher ed. So for me, I am probably one of the few that had just a limited number of years in the higher ed space. So knowing that I needed to learn the environment and make some connections, you know, I applied, but I got way more out of this year than I could have ever anticipated. even being in a deputy CIO role and then an interim, you gave me tools that have enabled me to elevate my career, elevate my confidence, to step into new roles and opportunities, and definitely be seen, right? My leadership had no idea I was applying. Like I just did it. They're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And it made them look at me differently, that I was still seeking that professional development that my institution couldn't afford. That, I mean, that was not going to be an opportunity for me. I think many of us have attended conferences that and these sponsored programs that we would not have been able to do so, right? Our institutions were not looking to offer that to us and support us in those ways. So for the fellowship to give that to us and for us to get so much out of it, we're here all tonight. I think we could all evangelize us for many, many years and look to partner and pay it forward. Just because of all the things that we've learned and the tools that we have now, right?
Really appreciate you adding that, Kanisha. Thank you all. Thank you so very much for that. Well, looking at the time, we're scheduled for 1 hour, so we've got 5 minutes left. I will also emphasize if there are any more questions from the audience, please feel free to submit them. I've got 2 questions I'm hoping we could wrestle with, and if it takes us a little bit past an hour, hopefully you all will forgive me, and if you got to get going, let me know. But one is what are some of the highlights for you so far, right? The valuable or meaningful experiences, parts of the experiences that you had so far. And then the other is, what would you say to someone who's considering applying? Because that's the piece I'd love for us to end with. So let's first start with highlights. And I'll just throw that one out. But the other one of what would you say to someone, I'm going to ask each of you to respond, start with the fellows and then come to the mentors. But first, let me throw out what was something that stood out for you so far as one of your highlights over the last 9 months? Shy now. Go for it.
That yes and it's funny that Wes mentioned that, but I was just talking to a colleague about using that tool in our departmental meeting that I'm structuring. So that was just a tool and a technique that I used and plan to continue to use.
Thank you very much, Kanisha. Felix.
I mean, it's hard to narrow down one thing. I'd say it's all been a highlight for me, right? This whole experience. But if I had to pick one thing, I would just say the growth of my network, my professional network, not only with the mentors, but the other fellows in the group, and then their networks, right? Because we're all sharing each other's now. So that's the biggest highlight for me.
Really appreciate that, Felix. Wes.
The branding exercises and the building of your brand is probably one of the highlights for me. It wasn't something, quite honestly, that I gave any thought to until going through this program, and I've actually have practiced it since then in my own conversations on campus. So that was a highlight for me.
Nice, appreciate that, Wes. Kanisha, back to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The design your life. I mean, that was, such a unique experience, thinking about my current career path. What would, another opportunity look like if I chose something different? But that you guys were building giving us tools to be leaders regardless of the path, right? Regardless of the end game, what position that looked like, and how to have a tool to do that and think about it.
Really appreciate that, Kanisha. One thing I'll add to the Designing Your Life piece is that there were a number of mentors in the room for that program who had never done that either. And they were just, these are folks who were sitting senior leaders already and found it so profound to go through that experience. I remember, Sherry, that's one of the things you and I had spent some time with a couple of years ago. James.
I'm with everyone else. I mean, it's hard to pick one highlight. I think I didn't have a bad experience throughout the whole time. But one thing that really I got a kick out of, and it may sound very minimal, but I used to, because I knew the career path I wanted to go on, I was actually researching a lot of the CIOs that were part of the mentor group. And so to finally meet them in person, and then to see them put together as this all-star team of mentors. And so the highlight for me was actually watching you guys go back and forth about how you got to where you are, how you deal with the different institutions. And I think I said it at NerdComp one time. I said, just the crumbs that we get from your guys' conversations it just boomed because I was always somebody who searched for, you know, a CIO's time to explain these things. So just to watch the conversation, that was a highlight for me because it was a lot of the like casual conversation about everyday strategy. And it was like, whoa, this is what I've been looking for, like understanding this stuff. So that was a highlight for me.
I appreciate that, James. Yeah, so I will also acknowledge that I have been, you know, the expression fanboy. I've been fanboying on the mentors like the whole way through, being able to spend time and have those conversations with them. And these are, some of them are people I know really well. I've known Mac for 10 years, but others I've gotten to know a lot more over the last year and a half. We've been working on this together in the 9 months of the fellowship itself. Rowena.
For me, just knowing that I have a whole support system of all these CIOs out there gives me the strength to move on. Like I can just, if I have a problem or I'm dealing with something, I just have to know that think of all of y'all and all the knowledge that we have gained throughout this year. And it keeps me motivated and provides me inspiration. Also, the stories that we have heard in all the sessions of your journeys inspires us so much. I've also learned to be an advocate in my own institute, in my own department, using some of the lessons that I've learned from you all. I wouldn't have done this without the sessions I've had.
Really appreciate that, Rowena. Thank you. And Faye.
Yes, and everything that everybody said here, but how can you, my thing is the mentors. My things are you guys, Michael and Mac and Sherry and Ray, to seeing people of color and women, not only at the table, but rocking it and making change. And that is like, you guys are just celebrities to me. I think that was my biggest highlight. And to show you how much I love my heroes, I have on my wall, Maya Angelou, Tony Morrison and Josephine Baker. And they help me because I write and sometimes that's a lonely profession, and they kind of help me move on and get going. You know, I may have to like get some more frames because you guys are just, you do not know what you've done to really change lives. And I am just, and Michael, I know, I won't say that, you know, we usually tell this people, you know, people say when people pass, they are what a good person they are, but I want people to hear it when they're alive. But you are a thoroughly good person. You're one of the best people I have ever met. And I thank you for having this idea and putting this together with everyone else. And just, you do not know how appreciated you are. So there, I'll stop.
Very kind of you, Faye. And we should end on that note. And I'll record this one piece of video playing in the background of my apartment. No. Mac, Sherry, I'm curious as mentors, I think what is an experience that stood out for you as you think about one of your highlights so far?
I would say that first session with Roshana, because I think a lot of people didn't know what to expect. And she really helped people to break down lots of barriers and to be real, right? And the authentic stuff. You could not be part of those sessions without being authentic.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's a great point. Mac.
Yeah, it's tough, as everybody said, it's tough to pick. I remember, Michael, you and I, you know, this conversation has been ongoing for a long time, you know, in your head and my head, and to see it kick off and not have any faces associated with fellows, and then see the faces come. So my first big thing was actually we have applicants, and then we have faces, we have names, we have people, we have relationships, we have networks. And the last thing I will say is I was just telling this to my wife before I came in here, to see the growth in each and every person from where they were when we first met them to where they are right now. I'm like, let's grow this network. Let's grow this fellowship.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mac. And it's interesting because I've got two that I want to offer. I'm going to hopefully remember both of them as I talk this through. One, to that point, watching you all as fellows on the panel in October at EDUCAUSE, right? One thing, and I'm glad you're here, Faye, for me to say this aloud. I've never heard, what was it? Yes, colonizer in a panel conversation before, right? And I was just so giddy to see how authentic and engaged and informed and comfortable you all were in your own skin. And I use that term literally, right? That you were just holding your own, this was your stage, your moment. The two panels that you all did, I was so grateful to learn from and with you. and to watch how the community really responded. It was just there was so much positive feedback from those people who were in the room that the fellowship existed at all, and that those conversations happened. And then the other one that has stood out for me is being so grateful and how many existing sitting senior leaders have been willing to share generously of their time and attention to support the effort. So not just the mentors. Yes, there are 12 mentors who are part of the program, but we've had so many other people who raised their hands and said, how can I help? How can I contribute? And one example for me was the extended conversation we had with 2 sitting CIOs at EDUCAUSE who had just gotten their position, was it 2 months before? And they shared so openly. They were scheduled to spend an hour and a half with us. They spent 3 hours, right? Because they did their hour-and-a-half session and then stayed with us through the an hour and a half of lunch. And they were candid and open and just sharing details about how, from their own careers and how they went through the negotiation process. And just hearing that, so those conversations for people so close to their experiences, I thought so really valuable. And importantly, that they were not all people from historically excluded backgrounds. That was one of the pieces that was important to us. For those participants who are on the webinar this evening, if you have not checked out the website, you'll notice that not all of our mentors are people of color. They're not all women, they're not all men. We purposely tried to create a group of mentors that we could share among ourselves as well, because these issues are not going to get addressed just by people of color trying to solve it for ourselves, right? I have the same expression when I talk about gender issues. Women did not create the gender issue. You all cannot fix it on your own, because it's the men who've got to come into this, right? Those who are male identified as well. And so trying to think about how we take that same approach here. All right, so then let's end with this question of what would you say to someone who's considering applying? And I'm going to turn to the fellows first. And if you all don't mind me just going through in order, just think about what would something you say to someone who's considering applying, and we'll use that to end our conversation. Kenitra, can I start with you?
I would say, hands down, just do it, right? Your life will be forever changed. You will gain friendships. It's just a lifelong, life-changing event. Do it. Like, don't hesitate. Run to your computer, fill out the application, answer the questions, but do it.
Really appreciate it, Kenitra. Wes.
Yeah, ditto. Just do it. Makes, like I think Felix mentioned earlier, make sure you take some time to review the questions and put some real thought. I think the answers were probably a good indicator of like how open and responsive folks will be in the program, which is a very important part of the program. So your answers, I think, being authentic should show up in those responses, I think. So I think that would be very important.
Appreciate that, Wes. And Faye.
I want to say too, just do it, take that step, be thoughtful on your application, but if you are accepted, go into it with a completely open mind. Put yourself in a growth mindset, learning mindset, and ready to take chances mindset.
Thank you very much for that, Faye. And Stephanie.
Yep, I just do it. Who doesn't want more family? The people that I'm looking at right here, right now, y'all are my extended family, friends for life. So yeah, what an opportunity. Who wouldn't want that?
Thanks, Stephanie. Felix.
Yeah, I know. Do it is the first thing, right? Ignore that voice in your head that says why you shouldn't. And whether or not you're accepted, I would say, reach out. I think the website has all of our LinkedIn profiles. Connect with everybody here. You're still a part of the network. And if not this year, maybe next year. You never know.
Appreciate that, Felix. James.
Just do it. I think that's the theme. Just do it. Be authentic. Once you get in, I would say also just be prepared to do the work and signal to other people that you are taking your career seriously. And yeah, just do it.
Appreciate that, James. And Rowena.
Just like everyone said, fill the application, be truthful and thoughtful when you write your answers. This is a safe environment, so come into the program with an open mind, and you will gain a lot from it.
Thank you very much, Rowena. Sherry?
I would say rarely do we take time to invest in ourselves. This is a wonderful opportunity to invest in yourself for your future professional career growth, and with uncomfortableness and being scared, that's a good thing. That means there's an opportunity for you to step out. And I used to have a track coach says, if you're scared, go to church. Get out there and do what you got to do.
Nice, that's awesome. And Mac.
Yeah, if you're considering applying, I would say do it without hesitation. I doubt that you will, I don't know for certain, but I doubt that you'll find another opportunity like this. And this is a unique and special group, and you deserve to be part of it.
That's awesome. And I think that's the piece I would end with as well, Mac, that idea that the fellowship, despite the structure, we as mentors, we built the structure, we've aligned the resources, we've outlined the activities for the year, but what makes the fellowship experience is the fellows themselves, right? Are the fellows themselves. And we've been so grateful to this initial cohort, those who are willing to go out on faith and try an experience that was brand new, right? And so we are excited to have recruit for the next class. All right, so with that, we will end. Thank you all so much for taking the time this evening. I realize we've got a few people who've got to drop off already. And thank you all, those who attended the session as well. We'll post this recording onto the website. We should have it up by tomorrow, so you get a chance to pay attention to it. The applications will be accepted until the end of December, and then we will work through the review process to announce the next class by the middle of January. So we have a time to get the travel arrangements in place. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
All right, happy holidays. Bye.